You grab a coffee, tap a piece of plastic against a glass screen, and a machine quietly approves the transaction in a split second. You walk away with your drink, having never touched a physical piece of currency. We do this every day without thinking about the invisible system we're actually participating in. When you strip away the servers, the digital wallets, and the screens, what exact value is actually moving from your hand to the baristas? Money is an incredibly complex tool, but it was never invented by a single royal decree or a lone financial genius. Instead, it was an organic, global fix. As ancient communities grew, they realized that trading goods directly, barter, was entirely useless if you had a fish but the merchant only wanted firewood. To solve this, human beings needed a specific tool. This diagram illustrates the three essential roles any functional money must play. First, it needs to be a medium of exchange that everyone accepts. Second, it has to be a store of value, meaning it won't decay before you can spend it. Third, it serves as a unit of account, a standard yardstick to price everything else against. If any of those three pillars fail, the currency fails. Money is an engineered piece of technology, created out of sheer necessity to let thousands of strangers cooperate in a complex economy. The very first prototypes of this technology were simply the most practical, widely desired items a specific society had lying around. If you needed everyone to agree on value, you used objects that kept people alive or working. In ancient Europe, communities settled on cattle. A healthy cow was highly prized for milk, labor, and leather. The Latin word for cattle, pecus, is actually the root of our modern word pecuniary. But cows carry severe bugs as a financial operating system. They require constant feeding, they succumb to disease, and you cannot divide a cow in half to buy a cheap loaf of bread. Meanwhile, agricultural societies in Mesopotamia and Egypt relied on grain. Food was the ultimate local necessity, and the massive temple complexes in these regions evolved into the earliest centralized banking systems, built to protect massive harvests from rot. Instead of lugging heavy sacks of barley to the market, temple administrators tracked deposits using standardized ledgers. The cuneiform marks pressed into these clay tablets served as officially recognized claims on the grains stored back in the vaults. These version 1.0 systems solved the immediate problem of local trade, but physical utility brings physical burdens. If your money needs a grazing pasture or relies on hundreds of pounds of wheat, scaling up to long-distance cross-border commerce is nearly impossible. What followed was a multi-millennia design sprint. Without ever speaking to one another, civilizations across different continents began testing and discarding commodities, trying to optimize away the friction of early money. We can see how they graded these objects by looking at this matrix, which tracks the exact physical traits a commodity needs to survive. The first constraint is durability. Your wealth cannot rot or rust. The second is portability. A merchant traveling across a desert needs to carry immense value without bringing a caravan of pack mules just to transport the cash. The next test is divisibility. You must be able to break the money down for microtransactions without destroying its overall worth. Then comes scarcity. If a society uses something as common as sand for its money, hyperinflation hits immediately.
The object must be rare enough to hold its purchasing power. Finally, the ultimate stress test is recognizability. Strangers must be able to instantly spot a counterfeit. If a material is easily faked, trust evaporates. Very few natural objects pass all 5 of these physical constraints. No central authority handed down these 5 rules. The daily, brutal friction of ancient markets naturally filtered out the weak currencies, leaving behind only the most highly optimized materials on Earth. The objects that survived this global gauntlet perfectly suited their specific economic environments. Along the harsh routes of the Silk Road, traders utilized compressed blocks of tea leaves. These bricks were deliberately scored with grits so they could be accurately snapped apart for small purchases. They were light, universally desired, and if trade stalled entirely, you could literally boil and drink your assets.
But the single most successful commodity money in human history was the cowrie shell. Found in the warm coastal waters of the Indian and Pacific Oceans, these tiny shells dominated global trade for over 3,000 years. Cowries were a masterpiece of natural engineering. They were incredibly tough and almost impossible to degrade. They were lightweight, meaning millions could be shipped in the hulls of boats. Best of all, their complex, glossy ridges made them naturally anti-counterfeit. No human forger could perfectly replicate a cowrie shell. As societies perfected these physical tools, they inadvertently changed the way that the human mind perceives value itself. After centuries of using highly optimized objects like cowries and tea, an invisible tipping point occurred. People slowly stopped caring about the actual physical utility of the money in their hands. A farmer trading his harvest for a handful of shells didn't do so because he wanted to string together a decorative necklace. He accepted those shells entirely because he trusted that a different merchant, miles away, would accept them in trade tomorrow. This visualization tracks the relationship between utility and value. Even as the practical use of an object disappears, its worth as a tool for trade can grow larger than it ever was as a raw commodity. This concept, abstract value, is the bedrock of every modern economy. It is the exact same psychological mechanism that allows you to confidently trade your time and labor for numbers on a banking app today. The collective decision to treat a useless object as if it held immense power remains the most significant breakthrough in economic history. Yet pure abstract belief still couldn't fix the limits of the natural world. Shells and tea were subject to the whims of the climate, and a merchant traveling far enough would eventually hit a region where their specific commodity wasn't trusted. Commerce needed an ultimate physical baseline. Precious metals like gold and silver were completely indestructible. They could be melted down and divided infinitely without losing a single fraction of worth, and cultures across the globe already lusted after them. The final upgrade was applying a state-backed stamp directly into the metal. By marking silver with an official seal, a government guaranteed its exact weight and purity. The error-prone process of measuring raw materials was replaced by simply counting standardized units. The union of durable metal and state-backed trust provided the standard necessary for merchants to trade with confidence across thousands of miles.